"You were only ever Frank's wife," my mother-in-law said. She did not say it quietly. She said it at the head of a Sunday dinner table polished so brightly I could see the chandelier reflected between the silver forks and white china plates. Every Carter in the room stopped chewing. My daughter, Anna, lowered her eyes. My brother-in-law, Richard, leaned back with the faint, satisfied smile of a man who had been waiting for his mother to say the cruel part out loud. And Evelyn Carter, 81 years old, pearls at her throat and old Virginia money in every breath, looked at me as if I were a stain on the tablecloth. "You were only ever Frank's wife," she repeated. "Do not mistake that for being one of us." I held my teacup with both hands. Not because I was shaking, because I wanted them to think I was. My name is Margaret Hayes. I am 62 years old, a widow, a mother, and, according to the Carter family, a useless woman who had spent 32 years cooking soups, changing sheets, reading to my husband during chemotherapy, and keeping quiet while richer people mistook kindness for weakness. They were suing me for the lake house, the cedar cabin at Smith Mountain Lake, the one Frank left to me in his will, the one with faded green shutters, a crooked dock, and a porch where my husband spent his last summer watching the water turn gold at sunset. To Evelyn, it was a Carter asset. To Richard, it was a piece of inheritance that had slipped into the wrong hands. To Anna, it was the place where her father had taught her to fish. To me, it was the last room in the world where Frank's voice still felt close. The lawsuit arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. A certified letter from Carter and Bellamy. Undue influence. Manipulation. Mental decline. Predatory control over a terminally ill man. I read those words at my kitchen table with Frank's coffee mug still beside the sink. Then I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the blue folder I had started the day Evelyn first said, "A sick man cannot be trusted with property decisions." That was 8 months before Frank died. People think grief makes you careless. It does not always. Sometimes grief sharpens everything. At dinner, Evelyn lifted her wine glass. "We are not trying to hurt you, Margaret. We are simply correcting a mistake before it becomes permanent." Richard nodded. "Mother's right. The lake house belongs with the Carter bloodline." Bloodline. That word made Anna flinch. She had grown up hearing it. Carter blood. Carter standards. Carter legacy. As if love could be measured by a surname, and not by who stayed beside a hospital bed at 3 in the morning while a dying man apologized for being thirsty again. I looked at Richard. Frank signed the will himself. Evelyn smiled. Frank was medicated. He was lucid. He was vulnerable. He was your son. Her smile thinned. And you used that. The room went silent. I could have answered then. I could have told them what Frank had written, what he had recorded, what he had said about his mother's visits and Richard's calls and the pressure to return the lake house to the family trust before cancer took away his ability to fight them. I could have told them who I had been before I became the quiet woman at their table. But I did not. Silence is useful if you know what to listen for. For 20 years in the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps, I learned that the most dangerous person in any room is not the one shouting. It is the one taking notes. Evelyn thought my silence was surrender. Richard thought it was ignorance. Their lawyers thought it was fear. They were all wrong. I had spent 2 decades investigating fraud, coercion, assault, command abuse, stolen funds, forged orders, and officers who believed their rank made them untouchable. I had questioned colonels who sweated through their collars. I had watched generals lie badly. I had taken apart cases in military courtrooms from Fort Bragg to Germany. But after I retired, I put that life away. Frank had met me after all of it. He knew the uniform existed. He knew the medals were in a box. He knew why I did not hang certificates on the wall. He also knew I wanted a life where no one stood when I entered a room, where no one called me ma'am because they were afraid, where morning meant coffee on the porch, not evidence review. So for 32 years, I let the Carters call me Frank's wife. I let them assume I had no past worth respecting. Frank used to laugh about it after they left. "Meg," he would say, "one day Mother is going to discover she has been patronizing a weapon." I would swat him with a dish towel. "I am retired." "No," he would say, smiling at the lake. "You are resting." When the cancer came back, the lake house became our refuge. Not fancy. Not renovated enough for Evelyn. Cedar walls, old braided rugs, a stove that took 10 minutes to light, a dock that groaned under your feet. Frank loved every flaw. He said the house did not perform for anyone. It simply stayed. The last summer, he could only walk to the porch with my arm under his. He would sit wrapped in a gray blanket, thin as folded paper, and watch bass boats cross the water. One evening, after Evelyn had called for the 4th time that day, he looked at me and said, "She wants me to sign it back." "I know. She told me if I loved the family, I would not let you keep it." I kept my hand on his shoulder. "What did you say?" I hung up. Then he started crying. Not from pain. From exhaustion. People talk about terminal illness as if the body is the only battlefield. It is not. When a person is dying, greedy people hear a clock ticking. They begin to rush, to ask, to pressure, to call love responsibility and ownership legacy. Frank knew it. That was why he asked his attorney to come to the cabin. Not Evelyn's attorney, not the Carter firm. His own. A small-town lawyer named Daniel Price, who wore worn brown shoes and listened more than he spoke. Frank signed a statement that day. Voluntary, lucid, no coercion, no undue influence. He explained why he wanted me to have the cabin. He explained that his mother had repeatedly pressured him to transfer it into the Carter Trust. He explained that his brother had mentioned selling it to cover family liquidity problems. And at the end, he wrote one line by hand. Margaret did not take my piece. She protected it. I put that statement in the blue folder. Then I put emails behind it. Then call logs. Then a recording Frank asked me to save after Evelyn left a voicemail that made him sit very still for almost an hour. "If Margaret truly loves you," Evelyn said in that message, "she will return the lake house to the Carter family before you die." Before you die. Not after. Before. As if Frank's death were a deadline for paperwork. The hearing was scheduled in an old Norfolk courtroom on a Tuesday morning. Anna drove me. She kept both hands on the wheel and her eyes fixed on the road. "Mom," she said, "Grandmother has 3 attorneys." "I know." "And Richard has been talking to local reporters." "I know." "She wants to make you look like a gold digger." I looked out at the gray morning. "She may try." Anna's voice cracked. "Why aren't you scared?" I reached across the console and touched her hand. "I am." "You don't look scared." "That is training." She glanced at me. "What training?" I smiled faintly. "The kind your father always told me I should explain one day." Anna knew pieces. A military career before Frank. Legal work. Courts. She did not know the whole of it. I had never wanted my daughter to measure me by the worst things I had once been paid to examine. When we entered the courtroom, Evelyn was already there. Black suit, pearls, a cane she did not need but used well. Richard sat beside her. Their attorneys arranged their files in neat, expensive stacks. My table had one blue folder. Evelyn looked at it and smiled. Pity is the perfume of people who have not yet noticed the room is on fire. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Harold Bennett entered from chambers. He was tall, silver-haired, and moved with the careful economy of a man who had once worn a uniform. I recognized him immediately. Germany, 1993. A military tribunal involving procurement fraud, falsified medical supply invoices, and a colonel who believed nobody would dare question him in public. I had been a major then. Bennett had been a Navy Reserve officer attached as legal observer. We had not spoken in nearly 30 years. But memory can stand at attention faster than the body. Judge Bennett reached the bench, looked down at the case file, then lifted his eyes toward me. For half a second, he froze. Then he stood straighter. "Good morning, Colonel." The courtroom changed. Pens stopped moving. Richard turned his head slowly. Evelyn's face tightened. Anna looked at me. "Colonel," she whispered. I stood. "Good morning, Your Honor." Judge Bennett looked over the courtroom. For the record, counsel should be aware that Mrs. Hayes served 20 years in the United States Army JAG Corps and retired at the rank of colonel. I am familiar with her reputation from prior military proceedings, though not socially acquainted with her. If either party wishes to raise conflict concerns, do so now. Evelyn's lead attorney cleared his throat. "No objection, Your Honor." His voice had lost some of its polish. Evelyn stared at me as if I had taken off a mask. She did not understand. The mask was the helpless widow she had spent years drawing over my face. I had simply stopped holding it in place. Their case began with insult dressed as law. They claimed Frank's cancer made him impressionable. They claimed I isolated him. They claimed the lake house had always been emotionally tied to the Carter family and should not have been redirected to an outsider spouse. Outsider, after 32 years, after holding Frank's hand through fever, nausea, fear, and morphine dreams. After hearing him whisper apologies for things that were never his fault. Outsider. I wrote the word on my legal pad. Then I waited. Evelyn testified first. She was elegant, controlled, convincing, if you did not know what control sounded like. "My son was devoted to his family legacy," she said. "He would never have chosen to remove property from the Carter line unless he was influenced." My turn came. I stood without an attorney. A murmur moved through the courtroom. Judge Bennett looked at me. "Mrs. Hayes, you are representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." Evelyn's mouth twitched. She thought it was arrogance. It was not. It was familiarity. I approached the podium. "Mrs. Carter," I said. "How often did you visit Frank during the last 6 months of his life?" "As often as I was permitted." That was not my question. Her eyes narrowed. "Several times." "Did hospital staff ever ask you to shorten or delay visits?" Her attorney stood. "Objection." "Your Honor," I said. "This goes directly to the claim that I isolated Frank from family. The witness has alleged restricted access." Judge Bennett nodded. "Overruled. Answer the question." Evelyn lifted her chin. "There were misunderstandings." I opened the blue folder. Exhibit F email from Frank Hayes to Evelyn Carter, dated February 12th. Frank writes, Mother, if you continue pressuring me about the lake house during treatment visits, I will ask the nurses to restrict your access. I need peace more than I need another argument about property. The courtroom went quiet. Evelyn's hands tightened around her cane. I continued, Do you deny receiving this email? I do not recall. Convenient? Her attorney objected again. Sustained. Judge Bennett said, Colonel Hayes? Rephrase. I nodded. Mrs. Carter, did your attorney produce this email in discovery? Her lawyer shifted. She did not answer. I turned to Richard next. He entered the witness stand looking irritated, as if the whole proceeding had become inconvenient. Mr. Hayes, I said, did you ever discuss selling the lake house? He smiled. Only in general terms. To cover family liquidity problems? His smile faded. I do not remember that phrase. I removed another page. Email from you to Frank, March 3rd. You wrote, and I quote, The lake property is sentimental, but sentiment will not solve liquidity problems. If Margaret insists on keeping it, she is choosing emotion over family survival. Richard's face reddened. That was taken out of context. Then give us the context. He said nothing. People often say words were taken out of context when they wish they had never been preserved. Then came the recording. I asked permission before playing it. Judge Bennett reviewed the transcript. Evelyn's attorney objected until his voice grew thin. The judge allowed it. Frank's voice came first, weak but clear. Mother, stop. Then Evelyn. If Margaret truly loves you, she will return the lake house to the Carter family before you die. Anna covered her mouth. Richard looked down. Evelyn did not move. The recording continued. Frank said, It is my house. Evelyn answered, It was your father's before you, and his father's before him. Do not let that woman turn your illness into her opportunity. That woman, even Frank, dying, had not been spared the poison of that phrase. I stopped the recording. The courtroom remained silent long after the sound ended. Then I submitted Exhibit D, Frank's signed statement, the notarized one, 8 months before his death. Daniel Price testified by video. He confirmed Frank was lucid. Confirmed no medication impaired the signing. Confirmed I had left the room at Frank's request. Confirmed Frank had insisted on the final handwritten line. Margaret did not take my peace. She protected it. I did not look at Evelyn when those words were read. I looked at Anna. My daughter was crying. Not loudly. Just enough for me to see that something heavy had been lifted from her understanding of her father's last months. Evelyn's case collapsed slowly, then all at once. That is how weak structures fall. First a crack, then a sound, then dust. Judge Bennett took a recess. When he returned, his ruling was precise. The petition was dismissed. Frank's will stood. The lake house belonged to me. He also noted possible exposure for bad faith litigation, coercive interference with a vulnerable person, and discovery misconduct. Evelyn's face changed then. Not fear exactly. Recognition. She understood that money had limits. Status had limits. Even the Carter name had limits. The law, when properly fed with evidence, could still bite. Outside the courtroom, local reporters waited. Richard pushed past them. Evelyn remained seated in the hallway, one hand on her cane, staring at the marble floor. I walked toward the exit with Anna. Then Evelyn spoke. Margaret. I stopped. Anna stiffened. Evelyn did not stand. For the first time in all the years I had known her, she looked less like a queen and more like an old woman surrounded by furniture nobody wanted. Why didn't you destroy me? She asked. I looked at her for a long moment. I thought of every insult, every dinner, every time she treated my marriage like a clerical error, every time she called the cabin Frank's property, while I was the one cleaning his blood from the bathroom sink after treatment. I thought of the recording, the lawsuit, the way Anna had folded under generations of Carter's superiority. Then I said, punishment can change behavior. Compassion reveals character. Her mouth trembled. You pity me? No, I said. I understand the difference between winning and becoming you. I left her there. Not forgiven. Not destroyed. Seen. That was enough. 2 weeks later, Anna and I drove to Smith Mountain Lake. The cabin smelled of cedar, dust, lake wind, and old coffee. Frank's fishing cap still hung on the peg by the door. His slippers were under the porch chair. For the first time since his death, the house did not feel threatened. It felt quiet. Anna's son, Caleb, came with us. He was 9, all elbows and questions, carrying a plastic tackle box Frank had bought him. He found an old photograph in the hallway. Me in uniform. Younger, hairpin tight, Colonel's eagles on my shoulders. He stared at it for a long time. Grandma, he asked, were you important? Anna looked at me. The lake tapped softly against the dock. I thought of Evelyn and her obsession with importance. Important people. Important families. Important names. The word had always seemed heavy to me. And empty. I knelt beside Caleb. I was useful, I said. He frowned. Is that better? Sometimes. What does useful mean? It means when something was wrong, I tried to help make it right. He considered that. Like a superhero? I smiled. No, like a person with a job. He nodded solemnly, satisfied. Then he ran outside to the dock. Anna stood beside me in the hall. Why didn't you ever tell me all of it? I touched the edge of the photo. Because I wanted you to know me as your mother first. I do. Her voice softened. But I'm glad I know this too. That evening, we sat on the porch while the sun lowered itself into the water. Anna leaned against my shoulder. Caleb tried to cast a fishing line and nearly hooked a chair cushion. For the first time in months, I laughed without feeling guilty. Grief did not leave. It never does. It simply sat beside me instead of on top of me. Frank was gone, but the place he loved remained. Not as an asset, not as a bloodline trophy, not as a legal prize. As shelter, as memory, as peace protected by proof. People often mistake quiet women for empty ones. They see folded hands and soft answers and think there is nothing underneath. But sometimes quiet is discipline. Sometimes patience is strategy. Sometimes a widow sitting alone with a blue folder has already fought harder battles than the people trying to frighten her can imagine. Evelyn thought I was only Frank's wife. She was wrong. I was his wife, his witness, his advocate, his last line of defense. And before any of that, I was Margaret Hayes, Colonel, retired, useful, still, and finally, home.